What's up, everybody? Welcome to Tiger Cats Game Day on the Ticats Audio Network. My name is Courtney Stephen, joined as always by the son of McMaster, Mike Daly. Mike,
Shout out.
Yeah, man, coming off that long bye week. I don't know if it was much deserved, but it was much needed. What are you feeling like as having a week off and then coming back into the fold? How do you feel after the bye week?
I mean, I always felt good, but tell me, like, the hardest thing, especially in a situation like this where the Ticats are, trying to find a win and trying to figure out what's going on. That bye week isn't much rest. Maybe physically rest, sure, right? Go see your family, whatever it might be. Go play some golf, whatever you're doing. But your mind is not getting off this football, right? Especially when it's going the way it is. Like when we've been in this situation before, and you're on that bye week. What are you doing that entire week? What, like watching film? Oh my gosh, what's going on?
Man, you're definitely trying to get some work in because this is one of those situations. You go home for Christmas break, come back to the classroom, and the teacher rearranged the seating arrangement. You used to be sitting next to your friend, and now you're sitting next to somebody you don't even talk to. This is how it goes when an organization is looking for a spark. Sometimes there's changes, and there were a couple of changes over the last week or so since Edmonton came in and upset the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I don't know if you could call it an upset at this point because we've seen those two teams' paths diverge a little bit. But you know what? The bye week, it gave them a chance to reset, to recalibrate, and come out with a 0-0 mentality because that's what it's going to take for one of these two teams today to change the course, the trajectory of their season. We've got the 0-4 Ottawa Redblacks coming into Tim Hortons Field to take on the 0-4 Hamilton Tiger Cats at 5 p.m. Eastern. This is an Eastern Division battle in a season where the East has not been doing too hot at all. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we get into the specifics and the stats, let's talk about the lineups. Now, both teams are having marquee players miss action today. And it's not just today. They're looking at long-term losses. Both Jeremiah Masoli and Simone Lawrence. Coincidentally, these guys came over to Hamilton in a trade together in 2013 from Edmonton. Two impact players. Neither of them will be suiting up today. Let's talk about, first of all, Simone Lawrence missing time. We made there was a lot of discussion about the chemistry that was built between that linebacking core with Jovan Santos Knox and Cameron Kelly. Simone Lawrence, they played over 20 games together in a row. That was a lot of chemistry that was able to be built between those three stars, those three playmakers. But now with Simone Lawrence out of the lineup, how does that affect Hamilton?
Oh man, it's huge. And not to say, Kyle Wilson's going to step in. He's going to do a great job. He's a good player. He's been around for long enough that he understands what's going on. But when you lose a guy like Simone, future Hall of Famer, the absolute backbone of the Ticats defense, it's tough, right? Because like you said, they've gotten such a good chemistry between the linebackers, Cam Kelly, Jovan Santos Knox, and now Simone, that when you lose a guy like that, it's just, you feel comfortable playing again beside people that you just know what they're going to do in certain situations. The other thing about Simone, too, is, when you get younger guys to step into these positions, they'll do what the playbook says. They'll understand their assignment. They'll understand their role. But the thing that doesn't come out is what you call the vet savvy, or the savvy that a player has, right? And, you and I have seen it with Simone. He just understands on, when he's going to drop back in a zone, when to take away a dig, right? But then also be able to plant his foot the second before the quarterback throws it and come down to the check down and hit it for, a gain of 2, as opposed to just being a half step late. Now that check down gets you 6-7 yards and you're in tough on that second down. Just little things like that is where we're going to miss, I think, Simone the most, because the Ticats, they've gotten so used to dealing with them right over there and just making those type of plays, right? Like, it's tough to lose a vet guy like that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I know he'll be on the sidelines. He'll be in the locker room as it's a home game. But there's those times when it's second down, it's the fourth quarter, it's critical situation and you need that veteran player to step up and be a voice, just make sure everybody's locked in, dialed in. That's another element that is intangible, but I would be paying close attention to see who raises their game up, who becomes the vocal leader, who's the person who grabs everybody by the face mask and says, listen up, it's time to turn this thing around when the chips are down. So we'll be paying close attention to that storyline. A few other shifts. We've got Don Jackson back in the backfield now. Don Jackson was a guy who last season, 2021, he was biding his time, waiting in the wings for an opportunity. When he finally got into the game, he was explosive. He was creating plays and he was moving the ball, scoring points. And that's the kind of spark that the Ticats need right now. The offense has been a little bit less than what you would hope for, to put it nicely. So anybody who can create a spark, help on second down, help in the red zone, help move the chains, I think that's going to be great for them, as well as Anthony Johnson, the big body receiver who's a little bit outside of the normal, typical Ticats speed receiver prototype that we've seen over the years. So him playing in the slot is going to be a nice big target for Dane Evans to throw the ball to. For this Ticats offense, it's important for them to get rolling not only early, but just in general. It's important for them to move the chains. It's important for them to get into scoring position and give themselves a chance to be on the board and play with a lead. If they get behind early, I think it would be tough. So what do you expect from these guys on the offense? Looking at that lineup, what are some guys that you're going to be paying attention to from this Hamilton Tiger Cats offense?
Yeah, well, you look also with Alex Fontana in there at center, right? So you put Don Jackson in, and then Alex Fontana comes back at center, which seems to be the guy they want to be the starter, right? Because as soon as he comes back from injury, he's right back in there. So to get Don in there, I think what we're going to be looking for is gain some good yardage. And by good, I mean 4, 5, 6 yards on first down. Whether that's just a typical run, right? We've seen the Ticats when they've been struggling with the run, is, trying to do a lot of the screen games, stuff like that. But Don's just a different guy. Don's a different guy out on the field, and he can make those runs happen on his own, right? And now with the help of that O-line, which kind of seems like it's starting to round out and they're figuring out what's going on, who's going to start, where people are going. I think what we're going to look for is, the Ticats to try to get 4, 5, 6 yards on that first down to make it more manageable, right? Because Dane's throwing the ball well. It's just the turnovers are hurting him, right? And when you get into tough second and long situations, when you get into situations where you're behind, like you were talking about, and you're throwing the ball constantly over and over and over again, at some point those turnovers are going to happen. Right, so to have Don be out there and be able to get a few yards, 4, 5, 6, even with Sean Thomas Irvington, you'll see him hop in too, right? A little change of pace type stuff. But I think that's what I'm looking for with that new lineup is, okay, let's just see if we can help out our second and long offense so that we can get, into second and short situations. Just like we were talking last week, it's tough for the defense to deal with that.
Absolutely, and I think having Don Jackson in the game with those gentlemen on the offensive line, Van Zyl, Woodmansey, Fontana, Revenberg, and Kelly, they've had a couple of games. Most of them have gotten in there together at this point. I think that gives you a little bit more confidence to call that inside zone, outside zone, the more traditional run plays where you don't have to put the ball in your quarterback's hands and make him a ball carrier more than you need to. We've seen that play work in the past, but we've also seen the demise of the team at the hand of putting the ball in the hands of somebody who's not typically every down rusher when you give it to that quarterback on those outside run plays and whatnot. So I'd love to see the Hamilton Tiger Cats get a heavy dose of Don J early. I think that's something that the doctor ordered. Of course, they've got Seth Small coming in to do the kicking duties. Now, Michael Damagala, he is not out of the game, but he will flip-flop from being the place kicker to being the punter. So there's a little bit of a strategy at play there on the special teams side of the ball. I actually thought that Simon Laurier was doing very well, but obviously when things aren't going the way you want as a team, there are sometimes wholesale changes And then the special teams unit, that's what we're seeing. On the defensive side of the ball, not too much changes outside of Simone Lawrence. You still got Jamal Roll, Alden Darby Jr., Tunde Adeleke, Richard Leonard, Keontae Evans on the back end. Up front, Julian Hauser, Dylan Wynn, Micah Johnson, and Mason Bennett rounding out that defense. Let's go over to the other side of the ball. Ottawa, a ton of familiar faces. And these aren't guys who are just on the team, but I'm talking about some of the most impactful players. Obviously, there's Jeremiah Masoli, who will not be in action. But at center, Darius Sirocco, leading an offensive line that's only given up 8 sacks through 4 games, which is good enough for third in the CFL. Then outside, big play Jalen Acklin. And, of course, Lorenzo Malden, the fourth, who was tearing things up as of late, causing havoc from the defensive line spot. Let's talk about Ottawa and what they bring, what makes them dangerous, because both of these teams, they're 0-4, yet I think if you go in the locker room and ask around, guys could easily point out 3 or 4 plays across those 4 games that would have swung the tide in the other direction. They could have, quote unquote, easily been 2-2, or they could have stolen a win here or there. So these are not terrible teams. These are teams that have not found a way to win yet. But what makes Ottawa dangerous that the Ticats need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think, what makes them dangerous is kind of what's going to hurt them for this game, right? Jeremiah Masoli was playing really well for them, right? And he was keeping them in games. You look at early on, they had those close ones with Winnipeg, right? The BC one was a tough one. But Jeremiah Masoli has really helped that offense out. Now, what makes them tough for this game against the Ticats is they have William Powell. And William Powell, that's what they're going to lean on, right? Just like we were talking about with Don Jackson. With Jeremiah Masoli out and Caleb Evans in, Caleb Evans has some experience, so you still have to be, you have to be wary. He's going to understand where to put the ball. He's going to understand to, be safe with it. When it's time to take a shot. And he can run a little bit too. So, but the problem is we're going to have to stop. The Ticats are going to have to stop William Powell, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what they're going to lean on with Darius Sirocco up there leading the charge, understanding what the Ticats defense is doing, right? That's another thing is that if you don't think that Jalen Acklin, Darius Sirocco, and Lorenzo Malden were sitting in the coaches' rooms this entire week, telling them what the Ticats do, how they do it, what their calls are, what their looks are, then you're wrong. That's exactly what they were doing all week, right? And that's what they're going to do. They're going to lean on William Powell to try to run the ball, and then they're going to take their opportunities with Jalen on the outside. But that's what I'm going to be focusing on is for the Ticats to be able to slow down William Powell to really stifle this Ottawa offense without Jeremiah Masoli in there.
Yeah, and you know what? William Powell, proven veteran in this league, tough runner. He can give you a move in space, but also he can be finishing at the point of contact, fall forwards, and grab another 2-3 yards. And I would be hesitant to overlook Caleb Evans quickly because in the CFL, we've seen guys who on paper are not supposed to get it done as a starting quarterback for whatever reason. And then you see the Trey Fords come into the game and get a win for Edmonton, who's struggling on the road. We've seen the David Watford story last year when Hamilton went into Ottawa and they stole one. So there is a parity between teams where if the coaches and the coordinators are able to put the players in positions to make plays, at the end of the day, everybody is a pro. And so I'm going to be interested to see if Caleb Evans can hook up with some of these, quite frankly, really, really, really dangerous receivers that they got, from the Canadian Shaq Evans to RJ Harris to Darvin Adams Jr. and, of course, Jalen Acklin as well. So that offense has weapons. They cannot fall asleep at the wheel just because Caleb Evans is the one back there calling shots. Now, I know a lot of things have been changing. Let's just quickly talk about some more of the trends. Both of these teams, of course, 0-4 at this point. The Eastern Division as a whole, all right, pending what happens with Saskatchewan and Toronto, the Eastern Division has 2 wins, 14 losses. So the interesting thing there is that if Toronto were to lose to Saskatchewan, whoever wins this game is technically tied for first in the East. So this is a wonky season. The division battles are so important because where you place in the division is more important than where you rank in the league overall. This is probably looking like it might be a crossover season. So East versus East, big time importance. Most of these teams have played most of their games against the West. Hamilton has played Sask, Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton. Ottawa has had a doubleheader with Winnipeg, then BC and Sask. So this is the first division game for both teams. Talk about a little bit of your understanding of the crossover. For fans who are uninitiated, what is the crossover and why is it something that we're going to probably hear more about later as the season gets down the stretch, talking about getting into the playoffs?
Yeah, so when one division is absolutely outperforming the other division, like we're looking at now with the West over the East, each team in the division, the first place team in each division will get a bye. Then the second place team will have a playoff game of the quarterfinals. But the third team in each division, that's where the crossover happens. So what they do is they take the best of record of the or take the top four out of it. So first place in the West is out, first place in the East is out, second place in the East is out, second place in the West is out, and then they take all the teams, the remaining teams, and they see who has the best record, and those are the next two teams to make it in to play that quarterfinal.
Regardless of which division they come through, from those remaining 5 teams, the next best 2 teams go to the playoffs. And so if both of those teams are from the West Division, they would be calling that a crossover, meaning there would be 4 West Division teams going to the playoffs and 2 East Division teams going to the playoffs. And that's potentially a scenario. It is still super early, but that is a scenario that looks like it could be playing out in 2022.
And when you're in a division like the East, right, and you're not getting the wins that you're looking at, like the Ticats, like the Redblacks, pretty much everybody in the East. When you're not getting the wins that you're looking at, it gives you kind of a false sense of, hey, everything's kind of going to be okay, right? Because at the end of the day, the goal is to win the Grey Cup, right? So what this is, and you hear Coach O talk about all the time, is it's a growing opportunity. But what helps is when you're in a division like the East and you're able to get first place with 1 win, right? It just allows you to go through some of those growing pains a little bit more. So when you look at the team like the Ticats or like Ottawa, in that locker room court, as the players are sitting there saying, okay, we're losing all these games, but we're only 1 game out of first. Is that something that is a positive thing? Or is it still like, how are we losing these type of games? It doesn't matter what position we're in. We're not winning any games, and we're losing games constantly. Does that play into any players' heads, do you think, right now? Or is that just kind of like, hey, no, we're really close to first, guys. Come on, we just got to put it together and we'll be fine.
I think the veteran players understand that you just have to get into the dance. And so it gives you a glimmer of hope. Because at the end of the day, the facts are the facts, and we've seen teams who, on paper, they're not supposed to win in every single sport there is, and they go out there and they get the job done when it's crunch time. And a lot can change between now and the end of the season. People can come back from injury. Other teams can make wholesale changes. You could be like Montreal and fire your coach and pretty much give up before you reach the halfway point. So I think, the season story is far from written, but it's interesting to start now playing out some of these storylines to see if these trends would continue. Talking about the trend that we currently have, 0-4 both teams, how we arrived here. I think there's some interesting stats that tell the story. Hamilton has had 8 chances in the red zone, and they have only scored 1 touchdown in the red zone in 8 chances this season. Not necessarily a recipe for success. Also, on second downs, the CFL, across the CFL, 2 and outs are down from the previous season in 2021, but Hamilton is averaging a whopping 8.1 yards to go on second down, which is leading to a 38.5% conversion rate on second down. So when you're having a hard time winning first down or putting yourself in a position where you have lots of options of play calls for that second down conversion, that's a trickle down effect. That stops you from moving the ball down the field. So if Hamilton is going to win this game, does it start not really from scoring points, but does it start with just being able to stay on the field and move the ball? Or is there something more complicated than that? Am I making it too simple, or is that really where it begins?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a field position battle, right? And we were talking about these games where, to get in the red zone is huge because that means points. Anytime you're in the red zone, coaches in the back of their mind go, okay, the kicker should be able to make this kick here. That's 3 points that I have in my pocket. Now we're going to try to get 6 so that we can further this distance. But that's all field position stuff. So when you're talking about, the special teams and the punter doing well, the defense getting out, 2 and outs, right? Stuff like that, turnovers quick, whatever it might be, those are field position. That helps you win these close games that you've seen the Ticats lose over this time. And like you were saying with the second down problem, right, being able to stay on the field, we need the Ticats need that first down production to be able to really help them out on second down. Because defensively, and you and I have both talked about this many, many times, when a team gets into second and long, so we're talking 8, 9, 10 plus yards, right? The defense can do a lot of different things that help them out and be able to get off the field. So when the Ticats are looking at 2nd and 8 or more, they know that their routes like slants, ins, outs, stuff that are going to break at about 5, 6 yards aren't going to get them the first down unless that receiver is able to catch it and turn it up. But the defense also knows that too. So any of those quick hitters, that's why you'll see on 2nd and long, there's 2 different things that defense does. They drop everybody into the pass to try to cover down all these different lanes, all these different throwing lanes, all the different zones on the field, right? Mm-hmm. Confuse them, come downhill, make plays on the ball. Or they heat them up, blitz everybody, and understand that the only way you're going to be able to throw this ball is quick because we're going to get one more person to you, but you don't have the yardage to go, right? So you throw the ball quick, you're going to catch it for 5 yards, but we're tackling you, we're off the field, punt the ball away. So that's why the Ticats, they need to get that first down production because defenses are just able to pin their ears back right now and either make plays on the ball or heat Dane up and give them no time at all. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's what, that helps them stay on the field, that helps them get points, and then to score in the red zone, they absolutely need to do that because when you're losing close games like this, field goals aren't going to cut it.
You're absolutely right. And moving the ball is the start of it. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the elephant in the room, which is the turnovers that the Hamilton Tiger Cats have been working through, having a couple of close games that ended or the nail was put in the coffin on a sudden change turnover where the defense has scored. There's been a number of games, Winnipeg, where there was a tip ball and an interception by a defensive lineman, run back for a touchdown. Calgary, in overtime, a tip ball intercepted by a linebacker to finish the game. We've had Edmonton stripped, short porch, scoop and score, nail in the coffin. So ultimately, I think protecting the ball has got to be right up there. If it's not the number one, it's 1A on the priority list for the Ticats. Here's a stat. Not really anything to be proud of, but Dane is on a streak, 5 consecutive games with multiple interceptions. So that is something that they're going to want to reel in. I don't think that you want your quarterback to become gun shy, though. And I don't believe Dane would be because he's a guy with a great arm. He's actually been racking up a ton of yards because there are those explosive plays here and there that they're able to get with those awesome receivers they have outside. With Tim White, David Ungerer Jr., now Turnowski in the lineup. But I think really one of the keys to success here is going to be, can the Ticats win the turnover battle? And a phrase we used to say, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but the defense has to think that they're playing against Ottawa's defense. And it's not really about, the offense of the Ticats not turning the ball over. but it's more so about, can the Hamilton defense force Ottawa to turn the ball over more than the Ottawa defense can force the Ticats to turn the ball over? Who's going to come out positive on the turnover differential? I think there comes a point where, as a defensive leader on the team, somebody steps up and says, guys, enough is enough. We're not going to stand by. Let's put our hat on the ball, swing for that thing, go up and get the pick, be confident. Somebody take a chance at changing the game. Are you going into this one rolling the dice a little bit more when you see your opportunity as a DB? Are you jumping in front of that dig? Are you going up for the pick with two hands instead of the knockdown? Given the situation, it really can't get much worse. So what is there to lose?
Yeah, and I think, they got a bunch of vets out there too at the back end on the DB crew. And I also do believe that with the bye week, especially the situation the Ticats are in, there's a lot more film study. So look for this game for people to be a lot more confident in what they're seeing. So when you talk about jumping routes, when you talk about seeing things before they happen, that kind of stuff, that's all film study. And when you have that bye week before, and I'm talking coaches, I'm talking players, you're that one step ahead. So I think this is a kind of a good little combo for the Ticats to get back on track, because with a lot of extra prep time, you know what I mean, a lot of coaches trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be our focus coming out? We're obviously turning the ball over like you're talking about. We need to figure out how to change that. But I think that when you see that game prep come into fruition, that's when you're going to see those turnovers. And I think right now you're talking about the defense taking chances. Yeah, they need to win that turnover battle, because I know we end up talking about the offense the whole time on these shows, and that's kind of the main focus point. But you're absolutely right. It's up to the defense to turn the ball over. So that turnover ratio, and that's an absolute key critical point to win every single football game, is that turnover ratio, and that is offensive, defense, and special teams. So I think you'll be looking for the defense to try to take advantage of their study of the game prep, the coach's game prep, whatever it might be, but taking some chances early on to get some turnovers.
Nice. Yeah, so let's talk about these matchups here individually. A lot of guys, but two new faces, Caleb Evans, Kyle Wilson. It's not often you have a quarterback matchup against a Wilt linebacker, but this season, since they've moved those hashes, I've been beating the table over this thesis that it really has affected the Wilt linebacker more than it has affected the field corner. Bringing the hashes in, the offenses aren't going to recreate themselves and all of a sudden start throwing to one strong 5 out of 10 plays. I think typically the offenses are designed to go into the boundary, into the short side of the field. So now that there's just more space there, their bread and butter is a little bit easier to execute. It's been reflected in some of those second down numbers across the league, less 2-and-outs, more yardage, faster games because people are catching the ball less incomplete. So I'm very interested to see this atypical matchup between the Will linebacker and the quarterback, because Will linebacker, you think, fit gaps, plug the run, match up with the running back. But in the CFL, in the passing game, that linebacker is having to bump out of the box. You're going to have to jam a receiver in the slot. You're going to have to drop into the hook curl zone. You're going to have to be able to relate to slot receivers in pass coverage. If Kyle Wilson is able to make an impact in the passing game, an interception, or maybe even just a pass rush and forcing some bad errant throws, I think that's where he shows up and makes a big impact. I want to see the Will linebacker and their impact in the pass game. Am I way off base, or do you see the same thing? Because, the Will linebacker is a different position in 2022 than it was in 2021. It's more like the Sam linebacker. But I want to hear your take on just the importance of those hashes moving and the impact that it's had on defenses across the league.
Well, I mean, you look at the past, like the Will linebacker is always picked on. And by picked on, I mean, it's an easy throw for the quarterback to go to the weak side. It's not as far. The sideline's right there. Things can happen quickly. You can read things out quickly. And it's generally where you look at offenses where they're putting their best receivers, right? At that X spot, at that W spot, that's where they're putting their best receivers. So it's just typical for them to look that side to the weak side. But now, when you move those hashes in, it added 4 yards out there. So
which is a
lot, right? Because you're already picking on that will linebacker, and that's in terms of like high-low, right? So you'll see routes try to go in behind him, and then like I was talking about with Simone being able to play a dig and then come down to the check down. That's the low route in front of him with that check down. And all they're doing is just reading one guy, because that's an easy way for an offense to say, okay, especially in this situation, Caleb Evans, this is going to be our play. You're going to have a dig behind the will, and then you'll have a check down. If the will sits in the dig and he's not giving you it, hit the check down, he'll turn up for 6-7 yards, right? If he takes a check down right away and takes the bait, boom, we're going to throw it in behind him. And then also now we have all this room outside. Make this guy miss, right? If we throw this check down, make this guy miss, there's an extra 4 yards that you have to cover. So as these hashes have shrank and the outside of the field has grown, that weak side and that will linebacker, they're getting picked on more and more and more and more. So now you look at the typical will linebacker spot where, oh, it's stuff the run, stuff the run, stuff the run. Well, no, they better be able to move around in space. And Kyle Wilson can do that. Kyle Wilson's good at that. He can move around really well. You'll never be able to replace Simone Lawrence, but Kyle, I think, is going to do a good job. But the one matchup also, if we're going to stick with that boundary side that I'm looking forward to, and this is just, personally, because I'm a DB and, that's kind of what I watch when I'm watching the games is DB receiver matchup. But it's Jamal Roll versus Jalen Acklin. And the reason for that is they both know each other very, very, very well. And when you know somebody well and you know their tendencies, you know what they do in and out of the breaks or what they do when they're trying to press, this is when you have to start seeing people change it up, right? And this is a cool thing about the CFL because Hamilton's going to play Ottawa 3 times, right, by the time the season's over. So now you have to really change things up and see how you do things a little bit differently. So I'm very curious to watch that, to see how they use that against each other, how Jalen Acklin knows what Jamal Roll does, Jamal Roll knows what Jalen Acklin does, and how they use it against each other and try to get some big plays off of them.
No, that would be a great one to watch. Jamal Roll, a guy who's comfortable in press coverage, and we know when the coach calls man-to-man and it's just not my guy, go out there and eliminate him. Those will be the reps we pay closest attention to. I'm sure it's going to be some primetime football action, great athletes on both sides, guys who've made really strong campaigns in the past. So wrapping up, let's talk about the storylines we're really paying close attention to. What are some of the main things people what's the X factors in this game? What are some of the things that are really going to determine who walks away from this 0-5 and is trying to pick up the pieces versus the team that can get a spark and get some momentum heading into this midway stretch of the year?
Yeah, I think if you look at the Ticats, number one, when you're watching this game is let's see how well they do on first down. We've talked about it all show, but that is the absolute number one key to this, to give, like you said, let them stay on the field for longer, right? Give them shots to get the ball downfield. Give Don time to get into a groove, into a swing of things, right? Keep that defensive Ottawa on the field, right? I think Ottawa's missing 3 of their DBs, Abdul Kane, Wanshadrick Hunter, and Patrick Levels, right? So let's put pressure on that Ottawa defense by keeping them out there, right? So I think that's what we're going to be looking for. That's what I'm looking for, to try to take some of this turnover stuff that's happening for the Ticats off of the table by handing the ball off, secure that ball, get 5-6 yards, and then you can just open the playbook up to whatever you want at that point. Keep running the ball, quick game, take a shot downfield, whatever it might be. But that's what I'm focusing on. That's my storyline for sure. How about yours?
From my side, I'm definitely paying attention to the Ticats defense to see if they can force the issue, if they can create turnovers, if they could be the spark. We saw Lawrence Woods III create a spark with a return touchdown, and how that gave the team a lift, and there's an opportunity to grab that momentum and run with it from the special teams unit. I think they didn't carry through, and they obviously didn't finish with a W, but that gives you a great chance to win. Now, on the defensive side, the same thing, a sack fumble, an interception, or maybe even just a big hit that can lift the team and get everybody some momentum. I'm looking for them to create some of those high impact plays, because ultimately somebody has to put their flag in the ground and say, this is where the buck stops. This is the time, the turning point in the year where we decided that we were going to be a winning team. And I think that starts on the defense, because what they say, they've been saying it for generations, but offense sells tickets. Defense really what wins games in pro football. So those will be the things to watch. You know what, Mike? I feel like we've run the gambit on this one. We could talk all day, but I think we need to just let the guys roll the ball out there and see what happens. So 5 p.m. Eastern at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, it will be the 0-4 battle. We've got Ottawa coming into town. The return of Jeremiah Masoli, Darius Sirocco, Jalen Acklin, and the gang coming in there to take on Dane Evans and the hungry Tiger Cats. All right, so make sure you check out the game on the Ticats audio network. Of course, Luke and RJ have the call, but you can tune in earlier and get that pregame show with Bubba and Andy. As always, we appreciate you listening, and we will catch you next week. Take care.
It's game day and you're ready. So are we. Let us know your thoughts. Email us at gameday@ticats.ca. Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly are here every game day with their insights into today's game. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.